You do not belong in this room anymore, Serena, so stop embarrassing yourself and leave before everyone sees how far you have fallen.
He left his wife for a beautiful mistress, but forgot his ex-wife was once a stunning beauty queen. Before we begin, where are you watching from today? Share your country or city in the comments. Do you think Serena was right to walk away from a husband who replaced and underestimated her? Or should she have fought harder to save the marriage? Please keep the discussion respectful. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and stay until the end. Your support helps us continue creating heartfelt stories about dignity, healing, quiet strength, and overcoming betrayal. She wore a crown once, Grant Whitmore said, lifting his champagne glass toward the stage. But that never made her a queen. The laughter that followed was thin and uncertain, the kind people used when they wanted to remain welcome in an expensive room. Serena Hale sat near the back of the ballroom beneath a wall of white orchids and silver light, her hands folded neatly over a black satin clutch she had not opened once. Across the room, a 20-foot screen glowed above the stage with the words "The New American Woman," framed by a sleek golden crown that looked painfully familiar. Grant stood beneath it in a perfectly cut tuxedo, one hand resting at the waist of Chloe Bennett, the young model he had chosen as the new face of Whitmore Media. Chloe wore a fitted crimson gown that caught every camera flash. Her smile was bright, practiced, and just uncertain enough to suggest she had heard Serena's name before. The host glanced toward the back of the room. "Serena, is it true you once held a national title?" he asked. Grant answered before she could. "A long time ago. Different world. Different standards." A few guests looked down at their glasses. Others studied Serena with the cautious curiosity reserved for someone who had been important before they arrived. Serena did not move. She watched the screen instead. The crown's left point curved inward at the same angle she had sketched on a legal pad 14 years earlier. The small star beneath it sat slightly off-center because the first designer had misunderstood her instructions, and Serena had decided to keep the flaw. It made the symbol human, she had said. That crown had belonged to the Serena Hale Girls Initiative, the scholarship fund she created with her pageant winnings before Grant owned more than a camera, a borrowed office, and 3 suits he rotated through every client meeting. Now the emblem floated above Chloe's face while Grant described a new era of beauty, confidence, and purpose. He used Serena's language almost word for word. "A woman should never apologize for taking up space," he told the audience. Serena remembered writing that sentence on the back of a hotel receipt after speaking to 20 girls at a community center in Baltimore. Grant had photographed the event. Later, he told her the line would make a strong campaign message. She had laughed and told him he could use it. Use it, not own it. At the table beside Serena, an older woman wearing a foundation pin leaned closer. "I remember you," she whispered. "You started the first scholarship program, didn't you?" Serena turned toward her, but before she could answer, applause rose across the ballroom. Chloe had stepped to the microphone. Grant stood behind her, smiling with the satisfaction of a man unveiling something entirely new. On the screen, the golden crown rotated slowly above the words, "A Whitmore Media Original." Serena felt the air leave her lungs in one measured breath. She did not look at Grant. She looked at the crown, then at the tiny off-center star. He had not merely replaced her with a younger woman. He had built the replacement inside Serena's own story. 14 years earlier, before Whitmore Media had offices on 3 floors of a glass building, and before Grant learned how to enter a room as though the future had been waiting for him, Serena Hale had stood beneath a different kind of light. She was 24 then, wearing a white evening gown and a crown that felt heavier than it looked, listening as the announcer called her name before an audience of millions. The photographs captured the smile, the flowers, and the glittering stage, but not the moment afterward, when Serena sat alone in a dressing room with mascara drying beneath her eyes and wrote down the first 3 names for a scholarship fund. She wanted to create. She had grown up in a neighborhood where girls learned early how expensive opportunity could be. The title gave her visibility, prize money, and a year of public appearances. Serena treated all 3 like tools. She visited schools, spoke at community centers, and used most of her winnings to establish the Serena Hale Girls Initiative, a modest program that paid tuition, bought laptops, and covered transportation for students whose ambitions were larger than their families could afford. Grant entered her life during the Foundation's first national campaign. He was a freelance photographer then, talented, restless, and still carrying his equipment in two worn black cases with broken zippers. He arrived late to the first shoot because his borrowed car had overheated outside Baltimore. Serena found him beside the parking lot, sleeves rolled up, trying to clean grease from his hands with a fast food napkin. He apologized without excuses. That impressed her more than charm would have. Grant saw her differently from the men who approached after the pageant. He asked about the scholarship recipients before asking about magazine covers. He stayed after events to help stack chairs. When a sponsor canceled, he spent an entire night redesigning the presentation for free. Serena believed he understood that the crown was not the story. It was only the door. They fell in love between airport terminals, school gyms, and fundraising dinners where the coffee was weak and the folding tables never sat evenly. Grant photographed Serena speaking to a room of teenage girls in Richmond, her hands open and her voice steady. Later, he showed her the images on his laptop and said, "You make people believe they are worth investing in." She remembered that sentence long after he stopped speaking to her with admiration. When Grant decided to launch his own media company, Serena introduced him to sponsors, nonprofit directors, former pageant organizers, and editors who trusted her name. She let him manage the foundation's publicity because he said they were building something together. She approved the use of the crown symbol, the photographs, and the language she had written for the scholarship campaign. The first Whitmore media office was one rented room above a bakery, where the smell of sugar drifted through the vents every afternoon. Serena answered calls when Grant met clients. She reviewed contracts after midnight, fixed presentation slides, and opened doors he had not yet learned how to approach. As the company grew, Grant's name moved higher on the letterhead. Hers moved lower. Then it disappeared. At first, Serena did not object. She told herself marriage was not a contest, and the work still helped girls who needed it. But Grant began retelling their beginning with himself at the center. He said he had discovered how to turn purpose into a brand. He described the scholarship campaign as the project that proved his instincts. At dinners, Serena heard her own ideas return to her in his voice, polished and rearranged. Each time, she stayed quiet because the checks still cleared and the students still received help. She did not understand that silence could preserve the mission while slowly erasing the woman who created it. The first evidence that Grant had chosen a replacement did not arrive as a confession. It arrived as an email attachment sent to an account Serena had stopped checking regularly. The subject line read campaign direction, and beneath it was a polished mood board for Whitmore Media's upcoming national launch. Serena opened the file at the kitchen island while morning lights stretched across the marble. On the left side of the page were photographs of her from 14 years earlier. Serena in a white gown beneath stage lights. Serena speaking at a school podium. Serena turning toward a camera with one hand resting lightly at her waist. On the right side were new test images of Chloe Bennett, a 29-year-old model Grant had recently hired. The poses matched. The colors matched. Even the angle of Chloe's chin had been copied from an old magazine cover Serena remembered shooting in Chicago. A note beneath the images read, "Modern Replacement." Serena stared at those two words until the screen dimmed. When Grant came home that evening, she was waiting in the library with the laptop open on the table. He paused when he saw the page, but only for a second. Then he removed his watch, placed it beside his phone, and asked how she had received an internal file. "Is that what concerns you?" Serena asked. Grant looked at the photographs as though they were inventory. "The campaign needs continuity. You used my face as a template. I used a successful visual language." His calmness hurt more than denial would have. Serena touched the trackpad and enlarged one of Chloe's images. The younger woman wore the same shade of blue Serena had chosen for the foundation's first scholarship gala. "Did she know?" Serena asked. Grant gave a tired breath. "Chloe understands branding. Does she understand she is being asked to imitate your wife?" His expression hardened. "You are not the woman in those photographs anymore." The sentence landed quietly. No raised voice. No apology. Only a judgment he had apparently reached long before saying it aloud. Grant walked to the window and looked down at the lights moving along the avenue. He said the market had changed. He said donors responded to youth, energy, and relevance. He said Serena had chosen to step away and could not resent him for moving forward. Then he placed a divorce folder on the desk between them. The papers requested more than the end of the marriage. Attached behind the settlement pages was a broad transfer of image rights, campaign ownership, and all remaining authority connected to the Serena Hale Girls Initiative. Grant tapped the signature line with one finger. "This keeps everything clean," he said. Serena read every page. He paced while she did, irritated by the time it took. In the bedroom later, he set her old crown on the comforter beside an empty storage box. "You should donate it," he said. "No one cares about this anymore." Serena lifted the crown carefully. One small stone near the base had always sat slightly higher than the others. Grant had once called it perfect because it was hers. Now he turned away before she placed it in the box. The next morning, Serena signed the divorce petition in black ink. She signed the financial disclosures. She signed the agreement dividing the house and their accounts. When she reached the page transferring the foundation's image rights, she removed it from the stack and slid it back across the table and signed. Grant glanced down, then at her. "You forgot a page." Serena closed the pen. "No," she said. "I remembered one." Serena moved into a furnished apartment overlooking the Potomac, where the walls were white, the closets were half empty, and every sound belonged only to her. For the first week, she woke before sunrise because her body still expected Grant's early calls, the coffee grinder downstairs, and the soft closing of the bedroom door when he left without saying goodbye. She unpacked slowly. Dresses first. Books second. The crown last. She placed the box on the highest shelf of the hall closet and did not open it again. The unsigned transfer page remained inside a leather folder on the dining table, surrounded by old foundation records she had requested from storage. Grant's attorney sent 2 reminders. The first called the omission an administrative oversight. The second warned that delaying the transfer could interfere with upcoming charitable commitments. Serena read both messages and filed them without answering. On a rainy Thursday afternoon, she found the document Grant had assumed no one would revisit. It was the original charter of the Serena Hale Girls Initiative, signed before their marriage and amended only once, when Whitmore Media began handling the program's publicity. The language was plain. The foundation's name, crown emblem, photographs, campaign archives, and educational materials remained under Serena's ownership. Whitmore Media had received a limited license to use them while she served as honorary chair. The license did not permit the company to replace her image, rename the campaign, or transfer the brand to another spokesperson without her written approval. Serena sat very still while rain moved down the windows in silver lines. Grant had built his largest new campaign around rights he did not own and permission he had never requested. The next morning, she carried the charter to Maya Collins, an intellectual property attorney whose office occupied the 4th floor of a brick building near DuPont Circle. Maya read the agreement twice, then placed Grant's new campaign materials beside it. The copied crown, Serena's archived photographs, and the phrase "a Whitmore Media original" formed a clean row across the conference table. "You can stop the launch," Maya said. A court order could suspend the campaign before the gala. Serena looked at the scholarship reports stacked near Maya's laptop. More than 3,000 students were waiting for renewal decisions. Several school districts had already announced programs tied to the national launch. "What happens to the girls if everything stops?" she asked. Maya did not soften the answer. Funding would freeze while ownership was disputed. Vendors might withdraw. Students who had done nothing wrong would carry the cost of Grant's choices. Serena turned toward the window. Below, people crossed the wet sidewalk beneath black umbrellas, moving around one another without looking up. Grant had counted on her caring more about the mission than the credit. For years, that calculation had worked. He had mistaken her restraint for surrender because both looked quiet from a distance. "Prepare the notice," Serena said. Maya reached for a legal pad. "For immediate filing?" "No." Serena closed the charter and rested her palm on its cover. "Let the gala continue." Maya studied her face. "Once they go public, the exposure becomes larger. So does the record." Serena explained that the scholarships would remain protected, the students would not lose their support, and Grant would be given every opportunity to tell the truth before witnesses. She did not want revenge. She wanted the campaign removed from the hands of anyone who treated generosity like an asset that could be inherited through marriage. Maya nodded and began outlining a plan that preserved the funding while challenging Whitmore Media's control. Serena signed 3 authorization letters that afternoon, each in the same careful handwriting Grant had tried to erase from the campaign. When she returned home, the apartment was dark except for the river light moving across the floor. She opened the hall closet, took down the crown box, and set it on the table beside the charter. For the first time, she did not see a relic of the woman she had been. She saw proof that Grant had never owned the beginning. Elena Ruiz arrived at Serena's apartment carrying 2 garment bags, a legal pad, and the same red leather portfolio she had used during Serena's pageant year. She did not begin with condolences. She walked to the windows, looked over the Potomac, then turned and studied Serena with the blunt concentration of someone checking a structure after a storm. "You have been making yourself smaller for so long," Elena said. "You have forgotten how much space your own voice needs." Serena lowered her eyes to the coffee between them. Elena had managed her public schedule for 6 years before Grant pushed her out of Whitmore Media, first by excluding her from meetings, then by replacing her with younger employees who knew how to flatter him. Elena had left without making a scene. She had also kept every speech, donor letter, school photograph, and campaign schedule Serena had once created. Over the next several weeks, she brought those records back 1 box at a time. There was no dramatic transformation. No team of strangers arrived to teach Serena how to become beautiful again. Elena made her read her own words aloud. She set a camera on the dining table and asked Serena to explain why the first scholarship had mattered. The first recording lasted less than a minute before Serena stopped. Her voice sounded careful, polished, and distant. Elena did not criticize it. She only asked, "Who are you trying not to upset?" Serena looked at the dark camera lens and thought of Grant correcting her tone before investor dinners, telling her to be warmer, shorter, less serious, more grateful. On the second recording, she spoke about a girl named Tasha who had taken 2 buses to attend a summer engineering program. Her voice steadied. On the third, she described the night a donor withdrew and Serena used the remaining pageant prize money to cover tuition herself. By the end of the week, she no longer sounded like a former title holder explaining her past. She sounded like the woman who had built something worth protecting. Adrian Cole called on a Monday morning. He was the chairman of the Cole Educational Trust, a national foundation that had funded several of Serena's earliest programs. They had not spoken in nearly 10 years. Grant had gradually taken control of those relationships, answering invitations, attending luncheons, and presenting Serena's work as a division of Whitmore Media. Adrian asked to meet at a quiet restaurant near the National Mall. He arrived without an assistant and remembered details Grant had forgotten years earlier. He remembered Serena staying after a scholarship dinner to help a student repair a torn application folder. He remembered her refusing to put her own photograph on the first annual report because she wanted the graduates on the cover. "I did not call because you were Miss America," he said. "I called because half the programs we fund still follow the model you created." Serena looked through the window at people moving beneath the bare trees. Adrian slid a proposal across the table. The Cole Trust was preparing a national education campaign and wanted Serena to direct it. The budget was larger than anything she had managed before. The position came with authority over partnerships, public messaging, and scholarship distribution. Serena read the first page, then the second. Grant's name did not appear anywhere. "Why now?" she asked. Adrian folded his hands. "Because you are available to lead under your own name." He did not ask about the divorce. He did not praise her appearance. He spoke about outcomes, schools, rural access, transportation costs, and the quiet ways girls were lost between acceptance letters and enrollment. Serena felt something inside her settle into place. "I have one condition," she said. "The campaign cannot be built around me." Adrian waited. "It should be built around the students. Their names, their work, their futures." A small smile touched his face. "That is why I asked you." When Serena returned home, Elena was waiting beside the camera. Serena placed the proposal on the table and stood beneath the soft light. This time, she did not ask what to say. She looked directly into the lens and began with the truth Grant had. "Spent years editing out. My name is Serena Hale, and I founded this work before anyone thought it could become a brand." 3 days before the gala, Chloe Bennett stood beneath the white lights of Whitmore Media's private fitting suite while 2 stylists adjusted the hem of a silver evening gown and Grant spoke from the doorway about camera angles. He wanted her left shoulder turned slightly toward the press line. He wanted her chin lifted, but not too high. He wanted the first photograph to feel effortless, as though the country had simply discovered her at the exact moment she became important. Chloe listened without arguing. She had learned that Grant preferred obedience disguised as instinct. On the mirrored wall behind her, a digital presentation cycled through reference images for the campaign. Most had been cropped tightly enough to hide their dates. A hand resting at a waist. A woman turning beneath stage lights. A blue dress against a gold backdrop. Chloe had seen those images for months, but that afternoon one slide failed to advance. The full photograph appeared before the editing layer loaded. Serena Hale stood at the center of it, 14 years younger, wearing the same shade of silver Chloe had on her body and holding her shoulders at the exact angle Grant had just corrected. Beneath the photograph was a production note that had not been removed. Recreate original Serena posture. Modernize for younger audience. Chloe stopped breathing for one quiet second. The stylist asked whether the gown felt too tight. Chloe said no. Grant glanced toward the screen, crossed the room, and shut it off. His movement was quick enough to answer the question she had not asked. Later, after everyone left, Chloe returned to the fitting suite and opened the campaign folder on the shared tablet. She found side-by-side photographs, archived interviews, color notes, and a file labeled replacement strategy. Her own image appeared beside Serena's with arrows marking hair volume, smile intensity, and preferred profile. Grant had not built a new woman. He had traced an old one and changed the date. That evening, Chloe drove to Serena's apartment without telling him. She remained in the car for nearly 10 minutes, watching the river lights tremble beyond the building. When Serena opened the door, she wore a soft gray sweater and no makeup, her hair pulled back loosely. She looked nothing like the glamorous rival Chloe had been taught to imagine. She looked tired, cautious, and entirely real. I found the files, Chloe said. Serena did not invite her farther inside until she saw the tablet in Chloe's hand. They sat across from each other at the small dining table, where the foundation charter still rested beneath Maya's legal notes. Chloe placed the mood board between them. He told me the campaign was inspired by classic pageant imagery. Serena studied the page without surprise. Some of it was. Chloe swallowed. He said you stopped caring about the work. Serena looked toward the window. I stopped being allowed to speak for it. There was no accusation in her voice, which made Chloe's embarrassment harder to hide. She admitted that Grant had promised her a national platform, a permanent role in the company, and a future in which she would never have to wait for someone else's approval. She had believed him because he spoke as if every promise were already printed on official paper. Why have you not exposed this? Chloe asked. Serena's eyes returned to her. Because destroying you would not make him honest. The answer settled into the room. Chloe had expected anger, perhaps contempt. Instead, Serena closed the tablet and pushed it gently back across the table. You did not create those files, she said. But now you know what they are. Chloe looked down at the crown pin fastened to her coat, the same emblem she had worn proudly for weeks. Slowly, she removed it and placed it beside the mood board. When she left, Serena did not ask what she planned to do. She only watched from the doorway as Chloe crossed the lobby with the pin no longer on her lapel. For the first time, Chloe understood that Serena's power was not waiting inside a dress, a crown, or a room full of cameras. It was the freedom to tell the truth without needing another woman to disappear. The gala opened beneath a ceiling of crystal light and suspended white orchids, with cameras lined along the entrance and donors gathering beneath the gold crown emblem Whitmore Media had placed above the stage. Grant moved through the room with the practiced ease of a man who believed every detail belonged to him. He greeted sponsors by name, adjusted the order of speakers, and reminded the production team that Chloe's entrance had to begin exactly when the main screen shifted from blue to silver. Chloe stood near the press line in the finished gown, her posture elegant, her face composed, but the crown pin was no longer fastened at her shoulder. Grant noticed. Where is it? He asked. Chloe looked toward the ballroom doors. I decided not to wear it. His smile tightened. It is part of the campaign. So was Serena. The words were quiet enough that only he heard them. Grant's eyes hardened, but a photographer called Chloe's name before he could respond. She turned toward the cameras, and he rearranged his face. At 8:15, the program began. Grant stepped onto the stage beneath the rotating crown emblem and welcomed the room to what he called a new chapter in American leadership beauty, and purpose. Chloe stood several feet behind him while the screen displayed carefully edited images of students, scholarship ceremonies, and hands lifting graduation caps. Serena's face had been removed from every frame, but her voice remained in the background narration, speaking words recorded years earlier about girls deserving futures larger than the circumstances they inherited. Grant raised one hand toward Chloe. Tonight, we introduce the woman who will carry this mission forward. The first notes of the entrance music rose. Then the screen froze. Serena's recorded voice stopped halfway through a sentence. A small authorization window appeared over the campaign image, followed by a neutral system notice that the licensed material could not continue without approval from the rights holder. The ballroom shifted into an uneasy silence. Grant looked toward the production table. "Continue," he said. The technician checked the console, then shook his head. "The system is locked." "By whom?" The answer came from the back of the room, not as a voice, but as movement. The ballroom doors opened. Serena Hale stepped inside wearing a deep sapphire gown with clean lines, long sleeves, and a soft train that moved behind her without ceremony. She wore no crown. Her hair was swept back from her face, and the only jewelry at her throat was a small diamond pendant her mother had given her before the pageant. Adrian Cole entered a few steps behind her, not beside her, leaving the space around Serena entirely her own. For 1 second, no one moved. Then an older woman from the National Scholarship Council stood. A former title holder near the stage recognized Serena and rose beside her. Within moments, students, donors, educators, and women who had worked with the original foundation began standing throughout the ballroom. The sound was not applause at first. It was chairs moving back across polished floors, one after another, until the room seemed to rise around her. Grant remained beneath the frozen crown, his hand still lifted toward Chloe. Serena walked forward at an unhurried pace, meeting the eyes of people who remembered the work before they remembered the photographs. Cameras turned away from Chloe, but Serena did not look at them. She looked at the students seated near the front, several of whom held programs bearing an emblem they had never been told belonged to her. Chloe watched Grant's face as recognition stripped away the confidence he had worn all evening. He had expected Serena to arrive angry, desperate, or eager to compete. Instead, she entered as though she had never left the story at all. By the time she reached the center aisle, the entire ballroom was standing, and Grant finally understood that they were not rising because she had once been beautiful. They were rising because they remembered who had begun everything he was trying to claim. Maya Collins rose from a table near the stage before Grant could decide whether to welcome Serena or challenge her. She carried a slim leather folder and moved with the calm precision of someone who had already arranged every fact in the order it would be needed. The room remained standing until Serena reached the front row. Only then did she turn toward the audience and give a small nod. Chairs settled back into place, but the silence remained. Grant stepped away from the microphone and lowered his voice. "You are disrupting a charitable event." Serena looked at the frozen screen behind him, where the crown emblem waited beneath the authorization notice. "No," she said. "I am correcting the record." Maya placed the original foundation charter on the podium, followed by the limited licensing agreement and the unsigned transfer page Grant had returned to his attorney weeks earlier. She did not dramatize the documents. She simply identified them. The Serena Hale Girls Initiative had been established before the marriage. Its name, emblem, archives, and educational materials remained under Serena's control. Whitmore Media had been granted temporary permission to promote the program, while Serena served as honorary chair. That permission did not include replacing her, renaming the campaign, or presenting its intellectual property as an original company asset. A murmur moved through the donors. Grant kept one hand on the edge of the podium. "This is a personal dispute being forced into a public setting," he said. "The campaign supports thousands of students. Serena knows what is at risk." The accusation was carefully chosen. He expected her to look emotional. He expected concern for the students to push her back into silence. Instead, Serena opened the sapphire folder Adrian had carried into the room. "That is why the program will not stop," she said. She placed a new agreement beside Maya's documents. It transferred administration of the scholarships to an independent educational trust, protected every current award, preserved the school partnerships, and guaranteed that no student would lose funding during the transition. The Cole Educational Trust and 3 other national foundations had already committed the next 5 years of support. The only organization removed from control was Whitmore Media. Grant stared at the first page. His company logo did not appear anywhere. "You cannot make that decision without negotiation," he said. Maya turned to the final authorization clause and pointed to Serena's signature. "She can, and she has." Chloe stepped forward from behind the stage. Every camera shifted toward her, but she did not pose. She removed the wireless microphone clipped to her gown and placed it on the podium. Then she took the crown pin from her evening bag and laid it beside the unsigned transfer page. "The campaign team used Serena's photographs as direct reference," she said. "I was instructed to recreate her poses, her colors, and her public image. I was told the rights had already been secured." Grant looked at her with disbelief. "This is not the time for confusion." Chloe met his eyes. "I am not confused anymore." The production technician restored the screen under Maya's authorization. The Whitmore Media branding disappeared. In its place appeared photographs of scholarship recipients, teachers, and graduates, each identified by their own names. No portrait of Serena filled the screen. No crown rotated above her. She had not reclaimed the program to place herself at its center. She had reclaimed it so no one could use the students as decoration for another person's ambition. Adrian walked to the microphone and announced that Serena would serve as founding director of the new independent initiative. Applause began in the student section, then moved through the educators, donors, and former title holders until it filled the ballroom. Grant remained beside the podium, surrounded by the language, imagery, and relationships he had once presented as his own. Serena did not watch him lose the room. She looked toward the young women in the front row and smiled for the first time that evening. Grant had expected her to destroy the campaign in order to punish him. Instead, she saved everything that mattered and removed only the lie. The ballroom emptied slowly after the final applause, leaving behind half-filled glasses, folded programs, and the soft hum of technicians removing Whitmore Media's branding from the screens. Serena remained near the stage while students gathered around Adrian and Maya, asking questions about the new scholarship structure and the first application cycle. She answered each one with the same patience she had shown years earlier in school gyms and community centers, never rushing, never looking toward the man waiting near the side corridor. Grant did not approach until the last photographer had turned away. He found her in a quiet gallery outside the ballroom, where framed portraits of former title holders lined the walls beneath muted gold lights. Serena stood before a glass case containing an old silver crown from another era, reading the small card beneath it. Grant stopped several feet behind her. For once, he did not begin with an explanation. "You have never looked more beautiful," he said. Serena's eyes remained on the glass. The compliment arrived too late to feel flattering. It sounded like another attempt to name her value after the room had already done so. "I was always this woman," she said. "You only noticed when the room did." Grant lowered his gaze. The confidence that had carried him through boardrooms, campaigns, and years of rewritten history had thinned into something almost ordinary. He said Chloe had been a mistake. He said pressure had distorted his judgment. He said the company had become larger than either of them expected, and somewhere inside the growth, he had lost sight of what mattered. Serena turned then, not angry, not moved. "You did not lose sight of me," she said. "You moved me out of the frame." Grant looked toward the closed ballroom doors. "We built all of this together." "We did." Her agreement startled him. "And then you spent years telling people you built it alone." He took a small step closer, but stopped before entering the space she had left between them. "We could start again," he said. "Without the company between us. Without the cameras." Serena touched the thin chain at her neck. Her wedding ring still hung there, not from longing, but because she had not yet decided where the last symbol of the marriage belonged. She unclasped the chain, removed the ring, and placed it inside the velvet crown box Elena had brought to the gala. The box rested on a narrow table beside the gallery wall. Serena closed the lid with both hands. "You are asking for another chance because you finally see what everyone else sees," she said. "I needed you to see me when no one was watching." Grant had no answer. She left him beneath the portraits and returned to the ballroom, where the students were waiting. 1 year later, The first Serena Hale Education Center opened in Baltimore inside a restored brick schoolhouse, less than 2 miles from the community center where she had given her earliest speech. The old crown was not on her head. It stood inside a modest glass display near the entrance with a plaque explaining that it had been auctioned to fund the center's first technology lab. The diamond stones had become laptops, bus passes, application fees, and classroom lights that stayed on after sunset. Serena walked through the main hall as students rehearsed speeches for opening day. Adrian stood among the donors near the back, giving her the same respectful distance he had offered at the gala. Chloe had sent a handwritten note and a donation under her own name. Maya was speaking with parents near the scholarship desk. Elena adjusted nothing about Serena's posture because there was nothing left to correct. At the microphone, Serena looked out at rows of young women waiting to begin lives no one else had the right to define. Grant had believed beauty could be replaced, repackaged, and made younger. He never understood that the crown had only reflected what was already there. Serena had not returned to prove she was still a queen. She had returned because she no longer needed anyone's permission to live as herself.